would request the panelists to please release the report. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Professor Chandrasekhar. And the points that he has talked about, like infrastructure excesses and excessive liquidation, financialization, and new instruments wherein we are trying to build upon this gap, the so-called gap of infrastructure that we are being shown to possess. These have been some of the measures, these have been some of the causes that the report has talked about, and it's tried its best to clinically analyze the available data from the Reserve Bank of India and as well as from the annual reports of the public sector banks. Thank you so much for setting up the context. But what exactly is the government doing about any of this? We keep hearing reports that Arun Jaitley has been saying that we have to address this issue. The former governor Raghuram Rajan has been talking about this quite a lot. I remember there was a time recently when Comrade Sitaram Yechury shot a pretty scathing letter to the Prime Minister saying that if you don't really come out with an action plan to address the issue of the NPAs, so it's as good as a take of the poor being made to pay for the profligacy of the rich. And I do not know as to how was the response, or if there ever was a response given to the demands. The most important demand that Yechury had made was to monetize the stressed assets so that they could be at least having the semblance of getting some sort of a recovery back. So let's hear more about what exactly is the government doing and how is it that we can actually come to the government to fall in line. So, combination.
Thank you. The chair of this seminar, I presume it's Dr. Chandrasekhar. No, are you? Because I since you started. I mean, our friends here, Yogendra Yadav, Mr. Venkatachalam, Mohan Guruswamy, Indra Rajaraman, and Nikhil Dey, and esteemed members in the audience. I also noticed one of my teachers who taught me economics in JNU, Dr. Sheila Balla here. So, anyway, I won't blame you for my lack of understanding, if you have. But thank you very much for calling me, but I'm actually misfit in such a what you call illuminating panel, and people who have done really very, very solid work in their own fields, and they can contribute much more. But I think the culprit why I was called was this letter which was referred to, that I had written to the Prime Minister on the 8th of July. And you wanted to know what was the response. And the response is the normal response, that there is not even an acknowledgement of the letter. Only I got a two-line thing saying that your letter dated so-and-so has been received. That's it. Beyond that, there is no, but except that we go on pestering them in the Parliament. But the basic point that we have been raising this, one is the staggering amount of these NPAs. It was seen that more than that 8.5 lakh crores of rupees, that is 855,551 to be precise, has been given by loans to our banks, have not been returned by the borrowers. So the question was that why, and right at that time when all this was happening, it was preceded by my colleague, I can say, a friend in the Rajya Sabha then, Mr. Vijay Mallya, who was there with us. I'm sorry, don't hold me responsible for his being in the Rajya Sabha, but the day it was known that this is the staggering amount of 9,000 crores, he was there in the house with us. He was there in the house with us, and some of us who are guilty of smoking have created for ourselves a smoking room in the Parliament, and he also keeps coming there, so that's where normally we meet. And he was actually organizing his travel to London that night, knowing full well tomorrow his passport will be impounded. Now, I can't believe this is happening without the knowledge of the government. I can't believe all this was happening in the central hall of the Parliament of India without that being known. The reason why I'm saying this is that it's nothing personal against him, but the system that we have today is such a staggering amount, and which the CAG later, after this report had come out, in July, the report being the Financial Stability Report, he actually said this, which was echoing what many of us also felt, and I quote what he said on the 1st of July. He said, "There is a belief that a significant part of NPAs could be amounts fraudulently obtained as advances from the banking system. There is also a belief that a large part of these amounts may have been transferred abroad and may never get recovered." Unquote. This is the CAG of India. Now, if this is this staggering amount, a little examination showed us that in the same RBI report, that the top 10 corporate houses owe a staggering amount of more than 7 lakh crores of rupees. The figures are all given there. I mean, I'm sure in this report also, I have not read it yet, I'm sure all this would still be there. But I mean, Reliance Group of 1.25 trillion, Vedanta with 1.03 trillion, etc., etc. It goes on, the huge amount. Now, if this is the case, what are we going to do about it? Then came up the whole discussion in the Parliament also about the health of our public sector banks and the need to recapitalize them, otherwise the banking system will collapse. So, how are you going to recapitalize these banks? But before that, why did this reach such a stage? When that was examined, what we found is that the ratio of the gross non-performing assets of the top 100 borrowers to the total NPAs, top 100 borrowers to the total NPAs was 19.3% in March 2016. It was 0.7% in March 2015. So this 1 year was a period when there was this profligacy. And the total amount that was recovered in 2015 and 16 by all public sector banks was 1.28 lakh crores. And this included 46% of these loans being written off. Then when we persisted and asked the government for the latest figures, then they gave us reluctantly finally in the Parliament. And that was that in the last 2 years, since this government has come, an amount of 1,12,089 crores, 1,12,089 crores has been written off in the last 2 years, 14-15, 15-16. Now this is absolutely unacceptable. When you ask for a loan waiver for our farmers who are committing distress suicides, that is not being granted, saying that no resources with the government. And all of us know it is the debt burden that is pushing these farmers into committing suicides. But for them, if they don't pay back the loans, the same public sector banks will confiscate their cattle, confiscate their property, push them into suicides. But this is the sort of waivers that you're giving. So it's not only from the point of morality that we oppose this, but even from terms of economics. If this is the amount of unproductive money that is being tied up in as which is not contributing anything to production at all, then something must be done. Then came up the issue saying that if without recapitalizing the banks, we cannot, system will collapse. So therefore, in order to recapitalize the banks, we should borrow from the reserve fund of the Reserve Bank of India. Many of us suspect that as one of the reasons why Raghuram Rajan was eased out, because he was opposing this. Now, Reserve Bank of India's reserve fund, if you are going to tinker with that, that is going to create a I mean, all sorts of, a myriad ways of financial instability in the country. And that is something which should not be done. But then the million-dollar question was, unless you recapitalize the banks, it will all collapse. So therefore, what should be done? Therefore, that answer, what we have been telling them is that you will first have to put out a plan of how you are going to recover these loans. And then I remember in those arguments talking to the, when the Prime Minister was also there, that it is actually obscene to look at the situation. When you have the Kingfisher owing 9,000 crores as default loans, you will have the owner moving in his private jet going all around the world in search of the calendar girls for the Kingfisher calendar. I mean, I said even in terms of, forget morality, in terms of everything else, I mean, how can this sort of a situation be? You will have to monetize the assets of those who have borrowed, not specifically for that company concerned that has not been, let's say, functioning or not taken off, but the overall assets that that group has. And that is a political decision. The fact that in this 1 year, this much of these NPAs have grown, the fact that the government till today does not even talk about any action plan for recovering or recovering these NPAs through monetization of the assets of these groups, that is something not acceptable, and that I think is a clear indication of the very high degree of crony capitalism that has developed in the country in the last 2 years. There is no point with the Prime Minister saying that the first scam-free government India has. There are no corruption scams. But this crony capitalism is a huge, humongous corruption. And to whom this has all been given out, and what are the kickbacks that are being getting that may be exposed over the period of time. But what needs to be done now? No plan to recapitalize the banks must be executed without an action plan for recovery of the unpaid loans. And that is the pressure we are trying to put on the government. So I'm very glad that our whole point was recovery first, recapitalization subsequently, or recovery, recapitalization simultaneously. But what is the action plan to recover these monies? That is the pressure I think that needs to be put on the government. That is why I think, the Public Finance, Public Accountability Collective, I'd like to thank them for doing this job, and I think this will be very useful for the public awareness in terms of building up this knowledge, because you cannot, at least I cannot accept a situation in India where for actually providing our youth, and because of our demographic dividend, in order to provide our youth with health, education and employment, we say there are dearth of resources. And if 70% of India is actually healthy, educated, skilled and can find productive employment, the face of our country will change, immensely. We can do that. Unless these sort of monies are wasted through such crony capitalism. So that is a choice we have. So it's not only a question from a moral point of view that how can these people get away with this sort of a loot, but it's from a purely economic point of view of building a better India, that these monies will have to be recovered and used for public investment to build our economic and social infrastructure so that a better India can be created. And that is why I think this is a very important issue. I'm glad such an eminent panel is here. I'm sure they are much more qualified and much more knowledgeable about these whole affairs, but I'll only request them through the deliberations to let us know what to pick up in the Parliament and how to pursue this case in the future. And I'm sure that will emerge from here. And as I said, I was a misfit in this panel. And my only guilt was to write this letter to the PM. And since I've been here, you'll also, after great persuasion, I decided to come here because they won't let me not come here. But otherwise, this was too intimidating for me to come and join with all these eminent people here. So you should also permit me to leave before I'm further intimidated. So with that, your permission, I'll take leave of you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Vijay Malya. As one of my friends, Vijayan, is very fond of saying that he's only a small fry. He's only a small fry, and we are yet to catch the big fish here. Cronyism, precisely the thing that we've talked about in the document, but importantly, we were thrashing out the ideas as to what exactly has led to this sudden departure of Dr. Raghuram Rajan, and we were zeroing in on probably the political pressure that was, imposed upon him, but somewhere we also talked about is using reserve banks' reserves to recapitalize one of the main reasons. But it was all in the very speculative realm, so we could not really include that as one of our analytical notions here. But Vijay Malya, can he be called a willful defaulter? Is he actually the person to be blamed? That's something which we need to figure out. Farmers have been blamed by the media, by the banks, as someone responsible for the surging NPAs. It's often known that the commoners are harassed, whereas these corporates, they go scot-free. As Nishan told about who the victim is, turns. This is precisely the point that C.H. Venkatachalam, the General Secretary of All India Bank Employee Association, has been fighting. And he's been demanding that the RBI, the government, should actually be more pro-people, come out with a declaration of treating the willful defaulters criminals, or in short, treating willful default as a criminal offense. So I would request Venkatachalam sir to please come and take it.
I'm very happy that the report has come because it's, I believe, a very timely effort to throw some light on this very disturbing issue of the bad loans. Today it has become a very big issue, but the banks, that's our job. We collect deposits and give loan, and naturally some part of the loan will not come back. We know that. But of late we are finding that this bad loan has become a very big issue, very alarming. And particularly we are from the banks, I'm from the All India Bank Employees Association, we find that taking loan and making it bad has become a very sophisticated art. It has become an industry by itself now. I think that we can do MBA on how to cheat the banks now. Some college can thrive. But the point is now that this is nothing but a result of a clear naked nexus, collusion and abetment of top people in politics, to some extent the banks, and also mainly the culprits were the corporate people who are trying to cheat the banks by taking the loans. It is not that earlier bank loans were not becoming bad, but it was very negligible. But in the last 20-25 years, at least we are finding that it's jumping up like anything, as Himanshu was telling. It was some 30,000-40,000 crores, and today, officially, the Reserve Bank says, the government says, the banks we are telling it is about 5,36,000 crores as of 31st March. Even though the actual real figure would be more than 13 lakhs crores. And it is not that overnight this is happening. Earlier bad loans, they were all hidden, because we know that even bank bad loans were also recognized as a good loan. In fact, they were even accounting the interest which is not coming as a profit, and then it was going on. Only after the provisioning norms came, now banks are compelled to declare bad loans, etc. But now we are finding that the amount is increasing day by day. In the last few years at least, it is so huge that the jump is so much, very alarming, etc. And naturally, we would like to know that how this has happened. Who are the people who are responsible for the bad loans in the bank? Whether it is the ordinary, the agriculture man who has taken the loan, or some people who have taken some retail loan, etc. So the country should know, because the banks are giving loan from the people's money. So the country must know, the people must know, at least the parliament must know who are the people who have taken the loans and still they have not repaid, and how it has been given. At least as the common people we know, even if you want to take a small retail loan, a consumer loan, there is so much of procedure, etc. But still we find that just like that money is doled out, and suddenly they say that money is not going to come back. So how these things are being given, and who is accountable? Whether only Kingfisher Malaya is responsible, or whether government is aware and still they have not taken any action. The Reserve Bank is there in all the boards, whether they were not aware that this is likely to happen. And what is the appraisal? State Bank is the leader of the consortium, 9,000 crores. Just for the brand name, Kingfisher, they valued 4,000 crores. So now it's nothing less than a toilet paper, that appraisal firm. So who is actually responsible or accountable? And that's why I appreciate this report is raising this question. And even today we find that it is being underplayed, because the actual gross income, gross profit of the public sector banks alone in the last 7-8 years, it is around 8 lakh crores. And out of which about 6 lakhs crores have been provided towards these bad loans. So almost 70% of the income or the profit generated by the banks are doing business with the people's money. The profit arising out of the people's money being utilized as bank loan must again come back to the country or the people. But we find that this is being drained out as provision for bad loans. And now we are finding some of the banks are in fact in red also. And it is not that the Reserve Bank says it is 5,36,000 crores, still it is alarming. We find there is another equivalent amount, about 6-7 lakhs of crores of rupees, which is all locked up in this, what they call the restructured loans. They say CDR, now new names are being invented every time. And CDR is also nothing but bad loan only. Reserve Bank reports are saying that they are very vulnerable, very risky, very dangerous. Any time they will also be again bad loans, but still the banks are evergreening these big loans, and they are showing as restructured loans. I don't know, the name itself is very, it's a misnomer. It's a collusive design to drain the revenue, but still they say it is corporate debt restructuring. But the government is talking again so much of reforms, but from our union we have been asking only a two-line reforms. Number one, declare the names of the defaulters, at least 10 crores and above, at least 100 crores and above. We have been releasing, now recently also last month we released a list of about 6,000 names of willful defaulters. We have the full list, but I think it will be very difficult for anyone to go through the whole list because it's so voluminous. So earlier we are publishing the full lot of defaulters. Now we have confined, it's an abridged edition, only the willful defaulters, those who have taken the loan, they have deviated, deliberately cheated the banks, or they have misused the money, abused the money. That list itself is about 7,000. We published a list of about 5,600 involving about 58,000 crores. Last month, I believe, I was with Arun Jaitley for another meeting. So I was telling him that we have published it. He said, yes, I saw that, but it's wrong. So I was taken aback for a minute, what he's trying to say. He said, no, that's an old one, 6 months ago. Today it is not 5,600. I have the list of 7,000 willful defaulters involving 70,000 crores. So because he's the finance minister, naturally he has the latest list. But I said, why don't you release? He said, no, Reserve Bank is not agreeable, etc. Ultimately, all these things are kept secret, but we have been asking, number one, you publish the list of defaulters and names, and also make the willful default as a criminal offense. Today, all the bank loans defaults are treated as a civil case. It goes on and goes on and goes on. At least when Reserve Bank said that these are all the criteria by which you can define a loan as a willful default. 9,000 crores is the default amount of Kingfisher Malaya. But only after some compulsion, State Bank alone, only their amount is now shown as a willful default. Remaining amount, about 7,500 crores of this Malaya loan, is still not a willful default, but is still sitting there and is dictating. And that's how the whole thing must be speeded up. And otherwise, we are finding that every time the banks are losing money. For example, out of this 13 lakhs crores of restructured loan and the real bad loans, we are not charging interest. And that means the banks are losing an interest income. CP will know better than me, he's an expert. But at least common sense tells me that after 13 lakhs crores of bad loans, which interest we are not getting, 1,30,000 crores is the direct naked revenue interest lost to the banks. It's an open loot. Once Yechury, he said that it is a daylight robbery, but with that he has gone. And now his son has come, but he was only trying to whitewash everything and cover up. But ultimately nothing is happening, and that's why I think this is very important. Research is very important. People like us in the union, we shout, we publish a list, etc. But I believe that a bad loan or the NPA is nothing but a byproduct of the crony capitalism that is very fast developing in our country. And for an agriculture loan waiver, at least I remember, a lot of hue and cry. Maybe it was around 60,000 crores like that. Now, much more amount has been drained out of the banks, but there is a lot of justification. No, economic condition, no, global crisis, this crisis, it is justified, it is not deliberate, etc. That only shows the politics behind it. And even Reserve Bank I am finding now, I don't know, I will not question the intention of Raghuram Rajan, but he was harping, clean up. Cleanup is only to completely keep the whole thing out of public focus. Once the money goes out, nobody is going to bother. Provisioning itself is like that, and now this is another way. And that is not a solution for recovering the money. Stringent laws and more tough action, political will, and we find today either UPA government or all the more NDA government, they totally lack the political will to collect the money because there is a lot of link up. And that's why this money is not going to come. And now one more thing is happening, sale of these bad loans. At rock bottom prices, at least recently we came across a thing, 700 crores of a bad loan of a bank that was not coming. He had the money to pay, he did not deliberately pay the money. Bank went for a compromise. Finally he said, no, I will pay 70 crores and then release me. That loan was sold to somebody, not by the borrower, it was sold to some other company for 70 crores out of 700 crores. Out of 70 crores, 7 crores was given down cash, remaining 63 crores in 10-year bonds. So after 10 years, whether chairman will be there, bank will be there, we will be there, we do not know. So ultimately with just 7 crores money, he could purchase a loan of 700 crores and with all the assets behind it. And I think very shortly there will be a very big mall in that area because it's a real estate. So this is going on, and now further they are trying to, they have decided to allow even FDI into this area of buying the bad loans of the bank. That means it's a very dangerous thing that is going on, and it's also very highly political. Increase the bad loans, provide for it, write it off, and weaken the banks. Once the banks are weak, they will say that they are useless, so consolidate them. So again make them consolidate, make them lean, and ultimately the objective is to sell them, to privatize them. So there is it's a organized crime of the people's money, and that is why I think it's very important that research must be there. People like us, we shout, we went on strike 2nd of September, 29th July, people are very angry with us still. We will still go on strike more and more on this issue. But I think it also has to be escalated as a political issue with the people's support. I think then all that research that you have done will be very, very useful. On our side, on our part, we will coordinate, we will work together, and I believe that before it is too late, before it is overtaken, I think this must be taken as a very important agenda. once again I appreciate the research paper that has come out today. Thank you.